Well, thank you very much. It's a delight to be here in Philadelphia, as it always is a delight to be here in Philadelphia. So I want to talk about my book, Scroogenomics, Why You Shouldn't Buy Presents for the Holidays. You might wonder, why am I criticizing Christmas? I mean, after all, what did Santa Claus ever do to me? Well, I have nothing against Santa Claus, or maybe a little, but my view is that the way we celebrate Christmas and gift-giving holidays is with an orgy of value destruction. In fact, I'm going to try to make the case this evening that around the world, we waste, not spend, but waste $25 billion per year. It just goes up in smoke, destroyed, through the process of non-careful gift giving. So that's the agenda for tonight. That's about as bombastic as it gets, but I'll try to be rational from this point on. I should say that the book actually doesn't have any pictures or tables in it, but tonight's presentation, you get sort of a bonus. I'm going to show you lots of pictures, so that should be fun. Okay. So what's the problem with holiday spending? What's the problem in the first place? Well, normally, if I spend $50 to buy something for myself, I'll only buy something. I'll only choose something if it's worth at least $50 to me. So normal spending during 11 months of the year, let's say, provides an underestimate of the amount of satisfaction that spending produces, right? Again, I only spend $50 if I get at least $50 worth of satisfaction. Gift giving is different. If I set out to spend $50 on one of you, I'm at a real disadvantage. I don't know what you like. I don't know what you have. I don't know what you want. I could spend $50 on you and end up buying something you wouldn't be willing to pay anything for. And if I did that, then I would produce no satisfaction. Instead of $50 producing at least $50 worth of satisfaction, $50 might produce a great deal less. Okay? So that's the problem. That's the problem with gift giving. Now, what's the nature of my evidence on that point? What I've done over the years, now it's been about 15 or 16 years I've been at this, I've done a lot of surveys of gift recipients, asking them about stuff they received as gifts. So make a list of the items you've received as gifts and who gave it to you, how much do you think the giver paid, what is the object, a CD or a book or whatever, who's the giver, your aunt or your uncle or your brother or your sister or whatever. So both, what do you think the giver paid, and what would you have been willing to pay for it, not counting sentimental value, just as an object? And then I've also asked them to think about items they've purchased for themselves with all the same questions. What did you pay for it? What's the most you would have been willing to pay for it if there were no other way to get it, and so forth. And so that what I can do with all that data is I can compare per dollar spent how valuable are items you purchase for yourself compared to items that others purchase for you. And the answer, after doing lots of these surveys over the years, is about 20% less. Okay, that is, the stuff others buy for me is worth 20% less to me per dollar spent than the stuff I buy for myself. Now, this isn't just true overall. It's true, for example, within items. So if I compare CDs I buy for myself to CDs others buy for me, I guess that's sort of an old example. Nobody buys them anymore. But if I compare books I buy for myself versus books others buy for me and so forth, we still get the same kind of results. So it's not kind of an artifact of looking at cranky people who happen to receive a lot of gifts versus happy people who don't. No, it's really about the process of gift giving. And by the way, it's not as it's not one of those, if you drive it off the lot, it's worth less kinds of things. No, it's just the bad process of choosing, the wrong stuff getting chosen through gift giving. Now you might ask, how does this happen? How could this possibly happen? And economic theory gives us some reasonable insight into this. I mean, according to economic theory, and here I'll try not to be too dry about this, but we take the view that people are best situated to make decisions for themselves. And that's because we know our own preferences. We know what we like and what we have and so forth. In fact, the view that we're best suited to make decisions for ourselves is really the basis for a lot of economists' criticism of government. One of the criticisms of government is if government's making resource allocation choices for us, well, government's going to buy us the green sweater when we wanted the blue one or so forth. And so, allocation through government is very wasteful, you might say. Well, givers, like this fictitious government, also don't know what we want. They don't know our preferences, and so their choices typically miss the mark. Now, of course, not all givers are equally poorly or well situated to make these choices. Some know a lot more than others. So let me show you some pictures. So I've done, again, a lot of these surveys over the years. This is one I did in 2001. And so these bars represent what I call the yield. So it's the ratio of the amount you'd be willing to pay for it to the price. Okay? And so these are the yield on gifts from different kinds of givers. I claim that overall the average is about 20%. That is 20% less. But for some kinds of givers, it's substantially less than that, or substantially more than that, rather. Givers, and it turns out, you can look across the various surveys I've done over the years, but it turns out it's the extended family. It's, I don't mean to heap criticism on grandparents, I really don't. But grandparents, not so much in this survey, but grandparents, aunts and uncles tend to do the worst. And significant others tend to do quite well. They choose items that are quite well matched with their recipients' preferences. Friends and parents tend to do pretty well as well. But again, it's the folks who are in the extended family who tend, here's a different, the same stuff from different years. So example, kind of going from least efficient, if you like, to most, aunts and uncles, cousins, friends, grandparents. This one, it's a little strange that friends show up sort of poorly. But then siblings, parents, and spouses and significant others are at the other end doing quite well. Now, why is this? Well, go back to the ideas from economic theory. We know ourselves pretty well. Others who are in frequent contact with us, they also know our preferences pretty well, and they know what we have. And so they tend to do pretty well. So I want to be careful here. I said I don't want to blame Grandma. It's not Grandma's fault that she tends to do poorly. It's because she's in less frequent contact with the recipients, and so she chooses things that they don't necessarily want. Now, at this point, some seem to be heaping criticism on holiday gift giving. It's time to think about whether I'm entirely wrong. And in particular, am I entirely wrong in the sense that, well, what about sentimental value? So can sentimental value rescue bad gift giving? Right? So I'm talking about a situation where a giver goes out, spends $50 on a sweater. But let's say this sweater is only worth $30 to you, right? Not counting sentimental value, but just as a sweater. The most you'd be willing to pay for it is $30. So far, that sounds like value destruction, because one could have spent $50 on oneself and bought something worth at least $50. But you might say, well, wait a minute. The giver gets some pleasure out of this. And let's say the giver gets $30 worth of pleasure out of giving this gift. Well, then, that's 30 plus 30 is 60. That's bigger than 50. Maybe this is actually a value-creating activity, and so stop complaining, Mr. Waldfogel. Well, my response, though, is if the giver also got enjoyment out of giving the recipient something the recipient actually liked, then we could have created a lot more value. Again, if the giver gets $30 worth of value out of giving something, and the recipient got, say, $55 worth of value, then the total value would be 30 plus 55, 85, as opposed to the 60. So compared to giving something that the recipient actually wanted, this choice of something that the recipient doesn't want destroys value, or at least misses out on an opportunity to create more satisfaction. Now, it is possible that givers only get value out of giving things that recipients don't want. Now, it sounds a bit like giver sadism to me, although there are, I think, politer ways to put it. There are situations in which, so what does an 11-year-old kid want? Well, 10 pounds of candy corn. But you wouldn't be very happy giving a kid 10 pounds of candy corn. You'd think this is an unhealthy gift, and so it's quite possible that the giver wouldn't enjoy giving the recipient what the recipient actually wants. But either paternalism or sadism, with very different ideas, I don't think that describes the bulk of our gift giving. In fact, there's pretty clear evidence that's not what's really going on in most gift giving. Why do I say that? Well, I'll come back to that. Okay, so I don't think sentimental value can rescue bad giving as efficient. Now, another thing that I hear a lot is the question, but wait a minute, isn't holiday spending good for the economy? And aren't you coming out against something that's good for the economy? And there's certainly a kernel of truth, or there's something there, but let's think about that for a minute. What does good for the economy actually mean? Well, a well-functioning market maximizes the surplus that both buyers and sellers receive from the transaction. What is this surplus that I'm talking about? Well, what do sellers get? Sellers get a price for their product, and that price exceeds the cost of bringing the thing to market. So the surplus, you could think about it as profit. And that is a good thing. We're all in favor of that. Profit's a good thing, not just because I'm from the Wharton School.